So here's the thing. A majority of us have had experiences where we get frustrated with ourselves or our minds and just feel like, why can't I do this? Why am I like this? But let me tell you how much better life got once I learned how the brain works and better understood how I can work with my brain instead of feeling like I am always trying to work against it. Hi, if you're new here, my name is Brianna and I am not a neuroscientist, so do what you will with that information. But I absolutely love neuroscience and psychology and want to share what I've learned over the years and my experience in applying it in my own life. Our brains function a certain way, and while we can't really change that, we can learn how to work with them for our own understanding and benefit. So let's go through some core concepts and how we can use that to our advantage. Key concept number 1. Our brains want to conserve energy, so our brains are naturally going to aim to do what we're most used to doing. Brains take mental shortcuts and default to known routines to conserve energy for more complex thinking. Most of our behavior is governed by subconscious patterns, and shifting away from our norms or what we do most often takes a lot of energy and focus. So clock that in your mind. Your brain naturally wants to do what it knows best. So this may be why you find yourself falling into old habits or not doing something that you told yourself you're going to do at the start of the week. Key concept number 2, our brains like comfort, familiarity, and predictability. At their core, they're wired for safety and security. Brains correlate familiarity with safety in a lot of ways, and this may be why we find ourselves continuing to do what we're used to doing, or why we might experience resistance to doing things that are outside of our norm. If we do what we typically do, our brains are more used to that. Our brains are more comfortable with that. Our brains can better predict what's going to happen if we do that. We might find that it's much easier to stick with the thoughts, the behaviors, the decisions that are more familiar and that we know the outcome to. And why we may find ourselves shying away from things when we don't feel in control or that feel more uncertain. Because to the brain, a known negative outcome is safer than uncertainty. So we know that brains are going to want to stick with their automatic behaviors, what we're most used to doing, our typical routines, habits, decisions, thoughts, and essentially being on autopilot mode. We also know that brains naturally want to stick with what's comfortable, what's familiar, what feels safe. So what can we do with this information? One of the most useful parts for knowing this is how it helps us have more compassion for ourselves. We can use this to understand why we do some of the things that we do, why we may find ourselves falling into old habits, or telling ourselves, I'm going to do X this week, and then the week passes and we realize we never did the thing. We can understand, oh, my brain is just being a brain, instead of judging ourselves or thinking we're incapable or inadequate in some way. Our brains are just braining, and that's okay. We can have awareness of that and then move forward. We can recognize what's happening, make some adjustments, and then take action from there. The second way we can work with this. So again, your brain is going to operate from an autopilot place unless you purposefully choose to do something outside your norm, which requires intention or reminders and cues for your brain. If you find yourself setting a goal or intention and forgetting to do the actions or falling back into old habits, this is why. I'm sure we've all been in some kind of scenario where, we always take the same route to work, and then one day, maybe there's a road closure, or maybe it's Saturday and we're not actually going to work, or we're supposed to take a different route, and we completely forget and end up going that same route that we always do because our brain is operating on autopilot. It knows this is the route we always take around this time. And even though we were doing something different today, our brain is elsewhere consciously. So our autopilot brain is like, okay, this is the route we always take. We're just going to keep taking this one until we realize, okay, forgot. Oops. Or for example, let's say that you decided you wanted to start adding yoga into your morning before you go to work or get started with work. And you set that intention, and then maybe a week or two passes and you're like, oh my gosh, I haven't done any yoga in the morning. Because when you wake up, your half asleep brain is not thinking about yoga. It just gets into the rhythm of what you're used to doing. So knowing this, finding ways to keep these things top of mind or give reminders and cues for your brain to remind your brain to do the thing is key, especially in the day and age that we are currently living in, where we have so many things pulling on our attention and distracting us, and our brains have like 10 million things to think about. And at this point, I think all of our attention spans are like 4 seconds. So if you are still here, congratulations. What we can do to help ourselves out is find ways to keep these things top of mind, or to remind our brains or cue our brains to do the thing, or even a reminder that these things are important to us and we want to be ingraining them into our lives. And there are a number of ways that we can do this. We can set reminders or alarms on our phone. We can write things out in our notes app so that it's easy to refer back to. So for example, let's say that you want to start implementing some kind of morning routine, and when you wake up, your half asleep brain is like, okay, I know that I wanted to start doing something different in the morning, but I don't remember exactly what I was trying to get myself to do. We can refer back to something that tells us, so that we don't have to rely on our brain remembering amongst all the other information that we're asking it to hold and think about. You can have a habit tracker. It sounds cheesy and cliche, but it serves as a good reminder. You can pair some actions with other actions. You can make something your home screen as a reminder. You can start consuming more information around the types of actions you're trying to get yourself to do more often, just so it stays more top of mind. With all these intentions and reminders and cues, you still have to remember to do the thing, but that's a different conversation. And knowing that this is how our brains operate, we can use this to help us push past resistance. Making a decision outside of our norm, such as going to the gym after work when that's not what we're used to doing, can send a signal of discomfort to our brain. It's not what we're familiar with. And this can lead us to talk ourselves out of doing it, or coming up with excuses when we don't even recognize that that's what we're doing, or that's why we're doing it. Our primal brain is wired to seek comfort. So sometimes our natural instinct will be to do what brings us comfort instead of what feels a little more uncomfortable. This is where we might find ourselves choosing the instant gratification option instead of delayed gratification. And this can look like sitting on the couch, scrolling on our phones, going and grabbing food, procrastinating, going and socializing instead of taking care of our responsibilities, doing whatever will bring us more comfort in the moment. And often what feels more comfortable is also just what we're more familiar with. So when you set a goal or have an intention or told yourself you're going to do something, and then it comes time to do it and you feel this resistance, you come up with reasons why you don't need to do it right now, why you can do it later, why you don't feel like doing it, or maybe even why it won't make that much a difference if you do it, so why even bother? But when that happens, you can pause and recognize, oh, my brain is just trying to stay comfortable. We can recognize those moments as our brain's just operating how they're meant to, instead of taking them on as truth or making them mean anything or making any kind of judgments about it. We can notice thoughts like, I don't feel like it, or coming up with excuses for why not to do it. Recognize that as the brain creating resistance, and then choose to do the thing anyways, even if it feels a little uncomfortable. And I think that that's a huge point of growth for most of us. And the last way I'll touch on for today of how we can learn to work with our brains is if you are working on a change or a goal of some kind, we can take this into consideration and help us prepare for setbacks to help us make better progress. If we know our brains are going to prefer doing what feels more automatic for us, what we're more used to doing, and if we know that the brain prefers what's familiar and it wants safety and security, then we can anticipate that and help ourselves out, right? We can understand that setbacks are bound to happen and we don't have to make any judgments about it. We don't have to make it mean anything about us. Our brains want to revert back to what it's used to. It's okay if you find yourself reverting back in some way, but you can notice it and then make a choice that better aligns with who you want to be or what your goals are. Instead of feeling shame for falling off the wagon, we can just notice it happened and then get back to doing whatever it was that we feel like we slipped off from. We can anticipate that there will be times where we want to go back to our old ways, whether we consciously realize that or not. There will be times where it feels really uncomfortable to do the thing. There will be times where we don't align with our goals. We are only human, and all we need to do is go back to putting one foot in front of the other. We can also use this information to minimize the chance or how often we might fall back into old patterns. What can you do to help remind yourself to do the thing? What can you do to help hold yourself accountable? What kinds of systems or structures can you put in your life to help you keep up with the things that you want yourself to do? What kinds of new thoughts and decisions that are outside of your norm can help with you changing in the ways that you want to? And when it comes to specific actions, you can mentally rehearse or visualize yourself doing the thing to help increase familiarity. So I've had clients do this and it has helped them so much, where if there are very specific things that you want to get yourself to do or not do, basically replacing it with a different action or decision, you can just close your eyes, take a minute or less, and visualize yourself doing the thing that you want yourself to do. And familiarize your brain with you acting in that way instead of what you've been doing or what you tend to do. So to wrap this all up, your brain is naturally going to revert to what you're most used to doing unless you have enough attention on doing things outside of your norm, such as creating new habits or making decisions that better align with your goals. Your brain is also going to seek comfort and familiarity. Understanding this, we can have more compassion for ourselves and understand that there's not something lacking in us. Our brains are just being brains. We can set reminders for ourselves and find ways to keep things top of mind so that we remember to do the thing instead of sticking with our normal habits and routines. We can recognize why we might experience resistance to doing something we technically want ourselves to do and know that we can do it even if our brain is coming up with reasons not to. And lastly, we can use this to help us prepare for and handle setbacks. So, with all of that being said, I would love to know, out of everything I talked about in today's video, what did you find the most helpful? Go ahead and leave a comment. Comment and let me know if you have any questions. I am making a whole series on how to work with your brain. So if you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, make sure you go ahead and subscribe and stick around. Come hang out with me more often. But that is what I have for you today. I hope you have a fabulous day and I will see you in the next video.